So this legislation, again, creates a very accountable system, and it puts the onus on the mayor. And it's not about Tom Barrett, it's about the mayor. It's a public policy decision as to which elected official is elected by the most individuals, is the best known, has to be the most responsible. And it says you are the person that we are going to hold accountable to improve education in this community. And if it doesn't work, the legislation has built into it a very important safeguard. And that safeguard is it goes directly to the people through a referendum. And if the people do not want this change, they can revert to the current system. So it respects the democratic process, both in terms of having the elected officials, the mayor being the person who is accountable, and also allows direct involvement from the citizens of this community. But I believe that we have to take dramatic action. And if we don't, we are faced with the specter of more and more challenges coming to us through an educational nature as well as a fiscal nature for this district. So I too ask you to move forward in a positive fashion on this legislation for the children of this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We have been joined by Senator Clayley, welcome, representing the Milwaukee area, and Senator Grothman, a committee member from just north of Milwaukee. Welcome, gentlemen. We'd like to open it now for a short period of time for a few questions from the committee members. Let me remind everyone that we have between 80 and 90 folks signed up to speak, and we are here mainly to listen. But if you have questions that cannot be clarified any other way, now is the time for the members to ask questions. Senator Jelk, I think, asked one of the first questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is really directed at the mayor and Mr. Morgan. Sit down for a rest your knee. Was that a Packer hit that caused that?
I can't recall ever being hit by a Packer.
Well, let's let it blow. Let me just make two real quick observations, Mr. Chair. First of all, to the mayor. To all of you, the fact is that this is personal to all of us. Failure in Milwaukee is not acceptable to the citizens who live 400 miles from here in Poplar, Wisconsin. What matters in the future of the children and the health and well-being of those kids is just as important to us as it is important to those who live here. And so we have a real urgency to make changes that try to reduce that failure rate that faults the entire state. The second, Mayor, I just want to say, as you know from your experience, that a lot of politicians use a windsock to lead to the popular. And I really, it takes the courage of conviction. Real leaders use the courage of their convictions to do what is right, to force change, to move from the status quo. I applaud that you can really put your reputation on the line rather than taking the safe route. And that's real leadership, and it gets us to the point where it may not be the exact bill, but it ought to get us to the point where we go beyond this hearing and actually enact legislation that results in some change. Perhaps this is really directed to Mr. Morgan. To respond to the question of urgency. There's two issues here. One is we cannot accept another year of failure in a school district where failure is too commonplace. Second is in the race to the top dollars. Clearly the stories are now being written that Wisconsin is lagging behind the rest of the states in terms of its effort. If we fail to enact meaningful reform, to what degree might that impact our ability to attract the kinds of dollars that can support the efforts for meaningful reform?
Senator, as I indicated, the race to the top application does not need to see a change in MPS governance. But it is clear from what we've heard from Secretary Duncan, from the President, and from more recently the General Counsel of the U.S. Department of Education, that it's not about just putting together a good plan. It's giving the Secretary of Education and the President of the United States a high degree of confidence that we have structure in place to execute on that plan to get outcomes. This President is about outcomes. This President understands how important education is in the lives of our people. He is a living example of how transformative to a life a good education can be for a child. He understands that there are urban school districts that have failed. He has a Secretary of Education, who has said to him, and continues to say to him, that the best way to manage, to govern urban systems is to have mayoral governance, to put the weight of education on the shoulders of the highest political leader in the city and have that person drive reform, drive outcomes. The President and Secretary Duncan believes that structure is good. We believe that structure will serve us well here in the state of Wisconsin. That is why the Governor Jim Doyle, is so supportive of this bill. That is why we believe it must be in place. And keep in mind, I kind of went through this very quickly, but 10% of the kids who are in K-12 education are right here in Milwaukee. As Milwaukee goes, so goes the state of Wisconsin, and that's increasingly becoming the case. If we don't fix this problem in Milwaukee and fix it quick, we're going to have to pay some very steep, dire economic. We're going to have some very steep economic problems here in the state of Wisconsin because we simply will not have that well-educated workforce that we need to attract economic activity, companies, and jobs to the state. This is, at the end of the day, a good economic development tool. The President understands that, Secretary of Education understands that, we understand. We need the tools, though, to drive reform. This will give us one tool that's important. We'd like to see, as Senator Taylor stated, we'd like to see this legislation being put in place before the application deadline, which is January 19th. Now, that's a little bit aggressive, but it seems to me that we need to say to Secretary Duncan and President Obama, we've heard you. We understand what you're saying. We have the right structure. We can get the job done. Make the investment in our kids in Wisconsin.
One real quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. In this, Representative Colon, we really focused hard on the urgency to show political leadership. If the legislature doesn't enact meaningful reform, not exactly to the terms of the bill, but meaningful change that's recognized as meaningful reform, will we not be subject as a legislature to be derelict in our duty to the children of this state?
Thanks for the leading question. I've sat with you and with many of you on Joint Finance for the last 3 budgets, and my support for this legislation comes directly out of that experience. It is going to be increasingly difficult for any of you who don't represent the area of Milwaukee to continue to spend the amount of dollars that are required to teach kids that are, as I said in my testimony, is 4% increasingly immigrant, increasingly poor, and increasingly disproportionately, increasingly learning disabled. If we continue to concentrate our policy in those children, in shortchanging, in my view, those children, you're going to create a problem that's going to spread throughout the state. And if we're unable to change this in Milwaukee, and I believe this is the method by which we can change it, it is going to be increasingly difficult for me to make it an argument for you to care about Milwaukee, and it's going to become increasingly difficult for me to say, I do want to do the best thing for all of the kids, as Secretary Morgan said, that are concentrated in Milwaukee. So I think this is something we need to act on.
Thank you, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mayor. If we pass this bill, you're going to do the main. You're going to be responsible for public education in the city of Milwaukee, MPS. And you've heard that over and over and you want that. Are you at all concerned that the person that you hire to be the superintendent will have enough tools in their toolbox to make the changes that are necessary to improve MPS? Because what I see here is just transferring the power that the board already has to the superintendent. But are you concerned at all that after X number of months that person comes to you and says, you know what, I can't get done what I want to get done because there's some issues out there that I don't have covered?